But without further ado, with me now, LJ Cheney, of course, from Pacific Scouting. LJ, of course, I'm filling in for Mark tonight. I'm Mike McDaniel from College Football Saturday. I'm really happy that you're here with me to discuss the top wide receivers in this year's class. And LJ, I'll just start off with this. First of all, how are you doing tonight?
Oh, I'm fantastic, man. I appreciate you guys bringing me on. This is always a huge day in college football. It's a little tinkered with now with the early signing period, but it's still a huge day, and it's been a blast. Trying to keep up with everything that's happened today. A few surprises, and yeah, man. So I'm glad you guys brought me on.
Let's get into the surprises. So, what was the biggest surprise to you from the wide receiver position here on National Signing Day?
So I think from a perspective of a national perspective, the biggest surprise was Justin Ross, the wide receiver who was in state in Alabama, who ended up going to Clemson. For me, it wasn't too much of a surprise. I heard a few things about it. I want to say yesterday or the day before. Someone in Alabama, in the state of Alabama, was mentioning that Justin Ross, they have good ties to the program, and they said no, Justin Ross is going to Clemson. So, for me, I had that feeling, but I think from a national perspective, Justin Ross definitely was the biggest surprise. And, another one, I think possibly Devin Williams. I didn't think he's the number one athlete on ESPN, but he's, obviously he's going to college as a wide receiver. I thought he was going to go to Oregon. I thought that was his best bet, to succeed just because it's wide open there. They have a good quarterback. He ended up going to USC, and that one, they got Amon-Ra St. Brown, and now they have Devin Williams in this class. Ton of other great talent for the 2018 class, but I figured he would go to Oregon, which would best suit him. So I think that was a bigger surprise for me.
Who's the one guy from the wide receivers in this 2018 class, the one guy who you're high on that not a lot of people are talking about? Because there are a lot of 4-star and 5-star guys, like you mentioned, that are, of course, always in the mix or always on these ESPNU signing day specials, but there are a handful of guys that kind of come out of nowhere every year and they end up producing. In your mind, who's somebody that you're high on, this maybe a low-end 4-star or high-end 3-star that not a lot of people are talking about that you think can make an immediate impact here? Maybe not in 2018, but maybe in 2019, and be a guy who can surprise some people here moving forward.
Well, this class is so deep, so there's a number of players that are going to be in that position, but I'll pick two. I don't want to just center it to one person. And depending on what recruiting service you follow, this guy is either, somebody or he's nobody. And this is Roderick Fisher. He's the 4-star wide receiver heading to WSU. He's signed there. I think he headlines that class as the top recruit via 247sports.com. But if you were to look at ESPN rankings, he's really not anywhere to be found. But Roderick Fisher, he's an interesting one. He's sitting at 6'3", 203. He's running a 100-meter dash, and I think 10.6, so he's got the speed, he's got the size. He's a raw player, and he's got an interesting story. He has the actual, the Blind Side movie with Michael O'Hare. He ended up being in that same situation, but he was in high school. He was really troubled with what was going on with his life. He ended up breaking down to his high school coach. I want to say before his junior year started, and his high school coach ended up adopting him, helping him turn his life around. And he was on the streets, and now, he's going to, in my opinion, going to be one of the top incoming freshman wide receivers to the Pac-12. And I think he can burst on the scene early because of, there's Isaiah Johnson-Mack who left. You got Tavares Martin, who is going to the league. And I think, he brings a different dynamic to that team because he still packs the speed, but he's got the size as well, which is what they've been lacking. Another one is Elijah Moore, and I don't know why he's not mentioned. Elijah Moore is he's rated as a 4-star at some spots, but he's 5'11", 181. He's going to Ole Miss, and he's one of their better signings in my opinion this year. He's a guy that you can just move around. He's really confident. He's a little slot guy, but at the same time, you can put him outside. He's going to win deep, and he's electric. Throughout the camps, throughout the 1-on-1s and 7-on-7s, everything that he was doing, he's just extremely fluid. He's a guy that can get side to side. He can burn you with route running, good footwork, and he's got tremendous hands. He's a guy that's going to extend outside his body, and just he's reliable, really reliable, and he's another one that I really like.
If there was one team in college football, LJ, today that most benefited from their wide receiver class, or most helped them, or in your opinion, helped themselves the most at the wide receiver position, if you had to pick one school, what school would that be?
I think it's it's a toss up. If I have to pick one school, I really think, oh man, this is tough. I want to pick two, and the two I want to pick is USC and Texas. But I think I'm going to have to go with Texas. You know, they signed so many good players. I mean, you know, first we can kick it off with Amon-Ra St. Brown. Or no, excuse me, I was thinking USC. But first, you know, we kick it off with Brennan Eagles. You know, Avante Woodard, and they got a number of guys who. They currently obviously have Colin Johnson there, who is a big body type. They have a number of smaller receivers, one that's yet to break out in Devin Duvernay, currently at Texas. But Brennan Eagles is another one who gives, you know, he's very athletic. He's already built like an NFL pro. And on top of that, he's got, you know, the agile movements within his route, and even after the catch, he's very strong. Avante Woodard, he's one that you know, I got to watching over last couple weeks, and he's one that I didn't necessarily grade as high as, you know, as I expected to. He still got a decent grade for me coming out, but overall that class, you know, they added a few other guys who, you know, I'm having a brain fart here, but I know that they've added some top talent there, and obviously they're sitting at number 3 in the rankings for this class. But yeah, I think Texas really nailed their wide receiver position this year.
Yeah, we were talking just before you came on here, LJ, about Texas, and you know, the success that they've had has really been restricted the last few years because of the lack of skill talent, and they've made the most of what they've had. I think that was even the case at some times for Charlie Strong. I mean, we saw the potential in some games, and then in other games we saw that they were extremely limited on the outside. I think at the quarterback position, it's always been a crapshoot at Texas. Now they got Sam Ellinger, they have Shane Buechele, they have the opportunity there at quarterback, and now they have the wide receivers that you mentioned to pair with that, along with the talent that they brought in the secondary. So I have to agree with you. I think Texas did an excellent job with their recruiting class. What's one school, in your opinion, that missed out most or had the most opportunity to bring in a bunch of wide receivers on the board that maybe kind of went elsewhere? Is there one team that you thought would score big today that maybe is disappointed at wide receiver?
You know, I think the one that really stands out to me is, I know Alabama landed Jalen Waddle, who's, you know, he's one of my top guys as well. But I think, you know, they had the ability to land a few more players, and obviously the Justin Ross, you know, missing on that was a huge one. He's a guy that he is one of the, for me, he's my number 8 ranked wide receiver, and I know I talked about him to kick this off, but he's one, if I were to grab a wide receiver to plug and play into a college offense right now and produce as a true freshman, I think Justin Ross is that guy. And, you know, them letting him out of state, you know, going to Clemson, I think that's a big loss. Jalen Waddle, obviously, he feels a need for them, even though they have a ton of receivers that are, you know, sort of slight in frame, lean, that have the ability to work the slot position. Jalen Waddle is going to be their incoming guy that, you know, obviously he signed later in the day with Alabama, but he's one that he's going to be able to fill that void, even it's technically it's not a void because they have those types, but he's going to be one that'll step in and be able to contribute early from, you know, the inside position. But I think Justin Ross, you know, just leaving Alabama, the state of Alabama, I think that was a huge loss. And they sort of whiffed on a lot of players this year, you know, and this is the first time in I don't know how many years that they haven't had a top 3 class. And I think a lot of that is due to, you know, them really filling in the skill positions last year, and they didn't necessarily need to hit on it this year. But on top of that, I think they sort of missed out on a few guys.
Yeah, certainly. This is the first time in quite some time that we've seen Alabama whiff. I don't think anybody's going to be worried about Alabama moving forward, or is even going to feel all that bad that Alabama missed out on some of the top talent in this year's class. They're still going to end up with a top 5 or 6 recruiting class. Like you mentioned, they filled in a lot of needs last year at the skill positions. But yeah, this is the first time in quite some time that I've seen Alabama miss out on some top-fledged talent.
Oh, definitely. It's been interesting, you know, and like you said, no one's going to be whining around for them. They're not going to be, you know, disappointed for them because me personally, you know, I hate watching dynasties just completely destroy college football, and that's exactly what they are. They're the best dynasty in the history of college football. So regardless, you know, Nick Saban's going to get things done. But, you know, it's interesting that Georgia just absolutely demolished this class and with what they were able to do, even though they didn't add, based off ESPN's rankings, you know, they added some top guys at the wide receiver position. But overall, I think, you know, guys from last year's class are going to be the ones that really stand out versus the guys they added in this year's class.
Yeah, this class I think certainly hurts from a depth perspective when you lose out on guys like Justin Ross, like you mentioned, having him go to the arch enemy, which is what Clemson has turned into for Alabama here over the last few years. I wouldn't doubt seeing them playing each other again in the college football playoff for the 4th year in a row this coming season with the talent that both teams bring back. But it is really interesting to watch the arms race now because Clemson is starting to pluck some of those Alabama targets that maybe they hadn't gotten before, and I think the Justin Ross commitment's a big step in the right direction for Clemson in that regard.
Yeah, and what's really getting things done, I think for Alabama, what's hurting them more than Clemson, obviously you've seen them come and plucking in, but how Kirby Smart is now sitting in Georgia. They're sitting on obviously the border of Alabama, and a lot of times those top Georgia recruits, Nick Saban was able to just go across, the Alabama-Georgia line and grab those recruits, no questions asked. Kirby Smart doesn't have any competition per se in the state of Georgia, so he's able to keep those guys. And he's even able to go into Alabama as well and grab some of the guys. He was one of Nick Saban's best recruiters when he was with Alabama. So Kirby Smart's doing a wonderful job. Obviously, Dabo Swinney's doing a wonderful job. And yeah, I think I'm perfectly okay with seeing Alabama miss out on a few of these recruits.
Well, LJ, I appreciate you joining us. Where can our viewers find you on social media, and of course your website as well?
Yeah, so you can follow me on Twitter at Pacific Scouting, and the website I'm associated with, I'm a co-owner, and then also, I do a lot of work for them in the Devy department, which is consisting of high school recruits, college football, and NFL rookies. It's dynastyfootballfactory.com. I just released my top 10 wide receivers for this class yesterday, so you can go check that out. It's you can go on my page, or you can go on my timeline on Twitter and find it, or you can go to dynastyfootballfactory.com. So yeah, again, you can follow me on Twitter at pacificscouting.com, and I appreciate you guys having me on.
Yeah, I appreciate it, LJ. Thanks for joining us tonight.
All right, thank you.